Welcome, dear listeners. In tonight's story, we fall from the iron skies of war into a slumbering ancient Earth. The year is 1944. Over the jagged teeth of the Transylvanian mountains, 3 white flowers of silk drift downwards, carrying the last survivors of the bomber, Lucky Lady. Sergeant Vance was one of them. The landing was brutal, a jarring collision with rock and pine. Dazed, Vance tried to get his bearings, calling out for his men, Miller and Davis. But a force, unseen and impossibly strong, gripped his parachute straps. He wasn't falling anymore. He was being dragged. He awoke to darkness and the sound of dripping water. He was suspended, his body tangled in the choking silk of his own salvation, hanging 10 feet above a stone floor. Nearby, he could hear the panicked breathing of young Private Miller, also trapped. They were in a cave. "Sarge, what's happening?" Miller cried out, his voice echoing unnaturally. Before Vance could answer, a sound scraped through the darkness, a dry, chittering noise, like 1,000 insects skittering over bone. It was close. Miller began to struggle violently, twisting in his harness. "It's here! It's here!" he shrieked. Then came a sound Vance would never forget, a sharp, whip-like crack, followed by a wet, tearing noise. Then, absolute, deafening silence. Vance stared in horror at Miller's now empty parachute, swinging gently like a hangman's noose. A single dark drop fell from it, splashing onto the rock below. From the oppressive darkness above, the chittering sound returned, now sounding horribly like satisfaction. The terror gave way to adrenaline. Vance frantically worked at his own straps, his fingers fumbling with the buckles. He had to get down. He had to find Davis. He had to get out. His survival knife, a small beacon of hope, felt heavy in his hand as he began to saw at the nylon. A voice cut through the dark. "Sarge, over here!" It was Davis, also suspended, but closer to a rock ledge. With a final desperate cut, Vance's straps snapped and he fell, crashing hard onto the stone floor. The pain was immense, but he was free. He ignored his screaming ankle and scrambled over to Davis, quickly cutting him loose. Now there were 2. They were armed with only a single knife and a service pistol with 5 rounds. Against what, they did not know. They only knew it was still there, watching. They chose a tunnel, guided by a faint, phosphorescent glow. The silence pressed in, broken only by their ragged breaths and the drip, drip, drip of water that sounded like a slow, patient clock ticking down their final moments on Earth. They found a chamber littered with bones. Some were animal, but others were horribly human, some still clad in the tattered remnants of centuries-old clothing. They were not the first to be dragged into this place. This was not a cave. It was a larder. From a tunnel ahead, they heard a sound, a soft, human whimper. Hope surged through Vance. "Miller?" Davis whispered, his voice trembling. Vance motioned for silence, his gut twisting. The sound was right, but the feeling was all wrong. It was a trap. The whimpering stopped, replaced by that same dry, chittering laughter from all around them. It was toying with them. It was enjoying their fear. Vance fired a single shot into the darkness, the muzzle flash illuminating nothing but empty, glistening rock. They ran. The tunnels twisted and turned, a labyrinth designed by a mad god. Behind them, the scraping, chittering sound grew louder, closer. It wasn't just following. It was herding them, guiding them deeper into the black heart of the mountain. They stumbled into a dead end, a sheer wall of rock. They were trapped. "It's over," Davis breathed, slumping against the wall. But Vance saw something else. High on the wall, a narrow crack, a sliver of hope. "Give me a boost," he commanded. As Vance climbed onto Davis's shoulders, the chittering stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. It was a predatory stillness, a held breath. Vance reached the ledge, his fingers finding purchase, just as Davis let out a choked gasp below him. Vance didn't hesitate. He dropped back down, firing his pistol. The bullet struck the creature's shoulder, and it recoiled with a piercing, inhuman shriek, dropping Davis. It was a thing of stretched, pale skin and long, bony limbs, its face a nightmare of black eyes and needle teeth. The Carrion Crawler. The creature fled into the tunnels, its shriek echoing. They were alive, but they had seen it. The image was burned into their minds. They scrambled through the crevice, finding another tunnel. This one felt different. It sloped upwards. There was a draft, a cold, clean draft of night air. The scent of pine and cold stone grew stronger. They were going to make it. "We're almost there," Vance said, clapping a hand on Davis's shoulder. But Davis didn't respond. He just stood there, his back to Vance, unnaturally still. "Davis?" Vance asked, his blood running cold. Davis turned around slowly. His eyes were wide and blank. From his mouth, the dry, chittering sound of the creature echoed. It was a puppet now, a hollowed-out thing. It lunged at Vance, no longer a soldier, but a weapon wielded by the monster. Vance shoved the possessed soldier aside, stumbling back. He had 3 rounds left. He couldn't shoot Davis. He just couldn't. He ran for the exit, for the promise of moonlight, scrambling over rocks as the thing that wore his friend's face pursued him with terrifying speed. He burst out of the cave into the cold night air, falling to his knees in a small, pine-ringed clearing. He had made it. He was out. He turned, pistol raised, ready to face his demon, ready to end it. But the possessed Davis stopped dead at the mouth of the cave. The thing wearing Davis did not look at Vance. It looked up, past him, at the highest peak of the mountain. Its head tilted in an expression that was not aggression, but pure, abject terror. The chittering sound it made was no longer a laugh, but a pitiful, desperate plea. Confused, Vance lowered his pistol and followed its gaze. He looked up, expecting to see a plane, or perhaps nothing at all. But there, enthroned on the jagged peak, was a figure, a colossal kingly silhouette of shadow and pale moonlight, as if the mountain itself wore a crown of night. It was a being of impossible scale, ancient and terrible. It wasn't a creature hiding from war. It was the reason the old maps were marked with warnings. Vance understood. The creature in the cave wasn't the apex predator. It was vermin. And the exterminator had arrived. The colossal vampire king on the peak raised one languid, shadowed hand. It was a gesture of summons, of a master calling a disobedient dog. In response, the very ground of the clearing began to tremble, and whispers like 1,000 dead voices swirled on the wind. From the earth around the cave mouth, chains of solidified shadow erupted, twisting like serpents. They shot forward, wrapping around the limbs of the possessed Davis. The Carrion Crawler shrieked, a sound of pure agony now, as the chains sizzled against its stolen flesh. The chains yanked hard, dragging the struggling creature out of the cave and into the clearing. It was pulled, scraping against the rock, and then lifted effortlessly into the air. It flew, a puppet on obsidian strings, up the mountainside towards its waiting, silent master. Vance didn't wait to see the end. He was a soldier. He saw an opening, a moment of distraction, a chance bought by the horror of another. He turned from the impossible tableau and ran, not screaming, but with the grim, desperate purpose of a man escaping hell. He risked one final glance over his shoulder. The Vampire King now held the smaller creature in one colossal, shadowed hand. As it brought the struggling form closer, its two burning eyes briefly scanned the forest below, and for a heart-stopping second, they seemed to lock directly onto Vance. The sergeant turned and vanished into the trees, his survival a footnote in a story infinitely older and more terrible than his war. He had escaped, but he now knew what truly owned the night in Transylvania. Thank you for watching our latest tale from Beyond the Veil. If you have enjoyed our spooky story, feel free to drop a comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you dare. And if you want to hear our next tale of terror from the pages of this old volume, click the story on the screen now. Until next time.